Welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be exploring
Okay.
the Cūla Rāhulovāda Sutta,
Right.
which translates to shorter discourse to Venerable Rahula. It's a Buddhist text, a sutta, which basically means it's a record of the Buddha's teachings.
Right.
And get this specific sutta was a discourse delivered by the Buddha to his own son Rahula.
Yeah, that's fascinating, isn't it? This sutta is part of a larger collection, and it's believed that after hearing this specific discourse, Rahula achieved enlightenment.
Enlightenment. That's a pretty big deal, right? It's like the ultimate goal in Buddhism, isn't it? To be completely free from suffering.
Exactly. So you can imagine that a text that supposedly led someone to that state must hold some pretty profound wisdom.
Right.
And it does. The setting itself is quite interesting.
Okay.
The Buddha was at the Jetavana monastery, a place he spent a lot of time.
Mm-hmm.
He realized that Rahula, although already on a spiritual path, needed a little extra guidance to get rid of what Buddhists call fermentations.
Fermentations. That sounds a bit unpleasant.
Well, think of them as those mental habits and negative emotions that kind of cloud our minds and prevent us from experiencing true peace.
Oh, okay.
Things like greed, hatred, delusion, those sorts of things.
Yeah.
The Buddha saw that Rahula was ready for the final push to overcome these obstacles.
Okay, I'm starting to see why this is a big deal. So the Buddha is about to share some serious wisdom with his son. Where does this all take place?
They were at the Grove of the Blind, and here's something that always gets me.
Okay.
Thousands of deities were following them, eager to hear this teaching.
Deities, like gods and goddesses, even the divine beings wanted in on this wisdom. Wow. This is sounding more and more like an epic spiritual gathering.
It really was. And the heart of the sutta lies in a series of questions that the Buddha asks Rahula.
Okay.
He goes through each of the six senses: sight, hearing, smell, taste, touch, and even the mind itself.
Wow.
And he talks about the objects of each sense.
So basically everything we experience in the world, everything we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, and think about.
Precisely. And for each of these senses and their objects, the Buddha asks Rahula three very pointed questions. Is this permanent, or is it impermanent? If it's impermanent, does it lead to suffering, or does it lead to happiness? And if it's impermanent and leads to suffering, can it truly be mine? Can it truly be me?
Those are some heavy questions. I'm already starting to feel my mind stretching a little bit.
That's exactly what the Buddha intended.
Yeah.
These questions, while seemingly simple, cut to the very core of how we perceive reality.
Right.
And this line of questioning highlights three core principles of Buddhism: impermanent suffering and the absence of a self.
So by walking Rahula through these questions, the Buddha is trying to show him that everything we experience through our senses is constantly changing.
Yes, and because these experiences are impermanent, they can't truly bring us lasting happiness.
Right.
Clinging to them, believing that they are permanent or part of a self, that's what leads to suffering.
I think I'm starting to get it, but how exactly does that lead to liberation, to enlightenment? It seems like a pretty big leap to go from understanding that things are impermanent to achieving this ultimate state of freedom.
Well, that's where the idea of disenchantment comes in. There's a specific word for it in the Pali language, nibbida. It's not about being gloomy or pessimistic, though. It's more about seeing things as they really are without getting caught up in our desires and attachments.
Okay, I think I'm starting to understand this concept of nibbida, this disenchantment.
Yeah.
But to be honest, it's a little hard to wrap my head around. I mean, our whole society seems built on encouraging attachment, on chasing after the next shiny object. How can this ancient idea of disenchantment help us navigate the nonstop sensory overload of the modern world?
That's a great question, and you've hit on a key point.
Yeah,
The world today bombards us with stimulation. It can be overwhelming, right?
definitely.
Think about how much time we spend scrolling through social media, watching videos, shopping online.
Right.
We're constantly being tempted with new experiences, new products, new things to want.
It's true. I know I'm guilty of spending way too much time on my phone just mindlessly scrolling. But how does the Sutta help with that? It's not like the Buddha had to deal with Instagram ads and TikTok trends.
You're right, he didn't.
Huh.
But the principle still applies.
Okay.
The Sutta encourages us to step back from all that stimulation, to pause, and actually pay attention to our experiences. Ask yourself, what am I giving my attention to right now? Is it really bringing me lasting happiness, or just a fleeting moment of distraction?
So it's about becoming more mindful, more aware of how these sensory experiences are actually affecting us.
Exactly. The Sutta is all about recognizing that the source of suffering isn't the sensory experience itself, but our attachment to it.
Okay.
We crave these fleeting pleasures, believing they'll make us happy, but that happiness never lasts. We just end up craving more.
Yeah. I see what you mean. It's like that feeling you get after indulging in a huge dessert. In the moment, it's amazing, but then you might feel a bit sick later, or you might even feel a little empty because it's over, and then you want another one.
That's a perfect example. The key takeaway from the sutta is that by recognizing the impermanent nature of sensory experience, we can start to loosen its hold on us.
So how do we actually do that? How do we cultivate this sense of disenchantment without becoming totally detached from the world? It can't be easy to just switch off those cravings and attachments.
It's not about becoming emotionless or denying ourselves pleasure.
Right.
It's about shifting our perspective.
Mm.
We need to move away from constantly craving and consuming and towards appreciating and being grateful for what we have. The sutta emphasizes the power of mindfulness.
Mindfulness, isn't that just a trendy buzzword? What does it actually mean in this context?
It means paying attention to the present moment without judgment. Noticing your thoughts, your feelings, and your sensations as they arise, but not getting swept away by them.
So instead of getting caught up in that cycle of craving and attachment, we can learn to observe those desires with a sense of detachment.
That's it. Imagine those desires as waves on the ocean. They're constantly rising and falling, but they're not you. You're the ocean itself, vast and unchanging. This realization can be incredibly freeing because it allows you to experience those desires without being controlled by them.
Wow, I love that analogy. It's like watching those waves crash on the shore. They're powerful, but they come and go. They don't define the ocean. I'm starting to see how this shift in perspective could really make a difference in how I experience the world. But how do we deal with all the external sensory input? It's not like we can just live in a sensory deprivation tank to avoid it.
You're right, the Sutta doesn't advocate for living like a hermit. It's about finding a balance.
Right.
We live in a world of sensory experiences, and that's okay. The key is to become more aware of how those experiences affect us. Think about it. Do certain types of music make you feel more anxious? Does scrolling through social media leave you feeling drained?
This is making me think about my workspace. I have notifications popping up constantly, and I'm always switching between tasks. It's no wonder I feel scattered and overwhelmed sometimes.
That's a great observation. The Sutta encourages us to be more conscious of the environments we create for ourselves and to make choices that support our well-being. You could try turning off those notifications or creating a designated workspace that's free from distractions.
I like that idea. It's not about eliminating all sensory input, but being more intentional about what we allow into our mental space. So disenchantment isn't about becoming some kind of joyless robot. It's about understanding the true nature of happiness.
Exactly. True lasting happiness doesn't come from chasing those fleeting pleasures. It comes from within, from cultivating a sense of peace and contentment that's not dependent on external things.
I'm really starting to get this. But what about those areas of life where suffering seems unavoidable? Like dealing with loss, grief, or difficult emotions. Those feelings are so intense. How can we possibly be dispassionate in the face of them?
That's a really important question, and it gets to the heart of what the Sutta is all about.
Yeah, this is where I think a lot of people, myself included, struggle. How can we possibly apply these principles to something as powerful as grief?
The Sutta doesn't suggest that we deny or suppress these emotions. In fact, the Buddha himself experienced deep sorrow and loss in his life. The key lies in understanding that these difficult emotions, too, are impermanent.
So even grief and pain, as overwhelming as they can feel, are ultimately fleeting. That's a tough concept to grasp, especially when you're in the midst of those difficult emotions.
It is tough, absolutely.
Hmm.
But the Sutta reminds us that just like pleasant sensations, unpleasant ones also arise and pass away. It encourages us to observe these emotions mindfully, to recognize them as temporary states rather than getting completely swept away by them.
I can see how that could be helpful, but it still feels a bit abstract. How do we actually do that? How do we apply mindfulness to something as powerful as grief?
It's not about ignoring or suppressing those feelings. It's about acknowledging the pain, allowing yourself to feel it fully, but not getting caught in the story or clinging to it as if it will last forever. Remember those waves crashing on the shore. The waves of grief might be bigger, more powerful, but they too will eventually recede.
Okay, I'm with you on that. But honestly, sometimes it feels like those waves of grief are just going to keep crashing over me one after another forever. How can we avoid feeling completely overwhelmed?
That's where compassion comes in. The Sutta emphasizes the importance of meeting difficult experiences with kindness, both towards ourselves and others. It's not about becoming cold or detached. It's about recognizing that suffering is a part of life and responding to it with understanding.
So it's about recognizing that everyone experiences these difficult emotions, that we're not alone in our suffering.
Exactly. We often try to resist or deny these feelings, but the Sutta teaches us to embrace them with compassion, to acknowledge them as part of the human experience. As we practice this, we discover a wellspring of resilience and inner strength that helps us to navigate the inevitable ups and downs of life with greater grace and equanimity.
This is starting to make a lot of sense to me. But I'm also curious about how these teachings relate to our relationships with others. After all, relationships can be a huge source of both joy and suffering.
That's a great point. The Sutta's message of impermanence is particularly relevant when it comes to relationships. We experience love, connection, and support, but also conflict, disappointment, and loss.
Definitely. It feels like relationships are constantly changing, evolving. Sometimes it's amazing, sometimes it's challenging. How does the Sutta help us navigate all of that?
By recognizing that change is inevitable, we can learn to appreciate the preciousness of each moment without clinging to expectations or fearing what the future holds.
So it's about being present in the relationship, enjoying the good times, but also accepting that things might not always be easy.
Exactly. Clinging tightly to how we want things to be or to a specific image of our partner only creates more suffering when those expectations aren't met or when the relationship changes. The Sutta invites us to cultivate a more open-hearted approach where we appreciate the present moment without grasping or resisting.
Okay, I'm following you. But what about when conflict arises? It's hard to stay detached and compassionate when you're in the middle of an argument, right?
It's definitely challenging, but that's where understanding the nature of suffering can be so helpful. When we're caught in a conflict, it's easy to get swept away by our emotions, to see the other person as the source of our pain.
Oh, I know that feeling all too well. It's so easy to blame your partner when you're feeling hurt or angry.
But the Sutta reminds us that the true source of our suffering isn't the other person, but our own clinging and aversion. It's our own attachment to being right, to having things our way.
So it's about taking responsibility for our own emotions, for how we're reacting to the situation.
Precisely. When we can see that our suffering comes from our own attachments and expectations, we can start to cultivate more compassion, both for ourselves and for the other person. We can recognize that they, too, are caught in their own patterns of clinging and aversion, just as we are.
Wow, that's a powerful insight. It's not about denying our feelings, but understanding where they're coming from. It's about recognizing that we're all just doing the best we can.
Exactly. And as we practice this, as we become more mindful and compassionate, we can start to create more harmonious and fulfilling relationships.
Yeah, it really is. Like we're all interconnected in some way.
Exactly. And as we practice this, as we become more mindful and compassionate, we can start to create more harmonious and fulfilling relationships.
This has been incredibly eye-opening. The Cūla Rāhulovāda Sutta is so much more than just an ancient text. It's a practical guide to navigating the challenges of modern life, to finding greater peace and happiness.
It's a reminder that true happiness doesn't come from external things or from other people. It comes from within, from cultivating a deep understanding of ourselves and of the nature of reality.
I think what strikes me most is that the path the Buddha laid out is not about withdrawing from the world or denying our emotions. It's about engaging with life more fully, more consciously, and with greater compassion.
It's about awakening to our true nature, to the wisdom and compassion that already exist within us. And this is a path that's available to everyone.
This deep dive into the Cūla Rāhulovāda Sutta has been truly enlightening. It's amazing to think that a text written centuries ago can still be so relevant and insightful today.
The Buddha's teachings are timeless. They speak to the core of the human experience, to our universal longing for happiness and freedom from suffering.
And the best part is this wisdom is always available to us. It's not some exclusive club. It's a path that anyone can choose to walk.
That's the beauty of it. The invitation is always open.
Well, on that inspiring note, we've reached the end of our deep dive. But the exploration doesn't have to end here. The Cūla Rāhulovāda Sutta offers a wealth of wisdom that can continue to unfold for us as we contemplate its teachings and apply them to our own lives.
I encourage you to reflect on what resonated with you most from this discourse. What are you clinging to that might be causing you suffering? How can you cultivate more disenchantment and compassion in your own life?
And remember, even the deities were amazed by this teaching. What makes this particular discourse so profound? We'll leave you to ponder that. Until next time, keep diving deep.